A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
There is a very big initiative that's simmering along and ready to overflow into cities and towns all over Australia. There's an opportunity for you to participate in what will be one of the big outreach initiatives, and it is about to launch. You'll be familiar with Answers in Genesis. They're building what's called the Answers Army to deliver a beautifully presented gospel to every home in Australia. The Answers Army is about ordinary people doing simple things to promote the gospel everywhere. Well, Dan Flynn is the Executive Director of Answers in Genesis in Australia, and Dan's joining us. Hey, Dan, welcome along.
Great to be here, Neil.
Dan, we know that you are sort of the right-hand man of Martin Iles, and we've been following with such excitement the things that have been happening with Answers in Genesis internationally and here in Australia too. And for some people, they won't be hearing about this very often. This might be the first time for some, but a big project, getting a Gospel of Luke into every household in Australia.
It is a big project, Neil. Answers in Genesis usually connected with big things. In the USA, they've got a life-size Noah's Ark, which I believe that you've been to see. We're trying to do something big here in Australia. We don't have an ark, but what we do have is the Word of God. We have ordered 250,000 Gospels of Luke to be printed and to arrive on Australian shores for Australians, just like your listeners, to take a couple of boxes and distribute to their neighbours. So we're very excited about it, Neil.
Okay, and we'll tell listeners how they can participate in that at the end of our conversation, because no doubt there's an opportunity for people who are a part of a local church everywhere to be able to reach out to their entire community. You're going to be building, in order to do this, what's called the Answers Army. What does the army look like?
The army are Christian people who, when they go on our website to volunteer, they'll sign a statement of faith and they'll acknowledge a church connection. So we're looking for Christian people to be involved in this, and this is the army that is trying to put action to their faith. We're all about action, not just hearing, but doing. And so people want to be action-orientated. And our first project, Neil, as the Answers Army, is to distribute this Gospel of Luke.
Okay, it's a big challenge, isn't it, to be able to get these Gospels into every home, and you're going to need a lot of people in this army to reach out to every town, every city, every community in Australia.
There's no corner of the country that we're not interested in, Neil. And, for example, there's a little island off Brisbane called Macleay Island, and there's a community church there, and they've said, look, we will look after our island. Give us the maps, give us the boxes, we'll make sure this island's covered. So this is what we're finding, Neil, that people are saying we'll own our suburb. Churches are saying we'll do the area around our church. So we're finding this level of volunteerism is really rising up. And it's great empowerment for mums and dads, a mum with their stroller and their toddler, getting out, taking these Gospels to the letterboxes and having really incidental conversations with people along the way.
You know, it's exciting to think about that person who's going to own the responsibility for their island. And there'll be those listening to us in smaller communities where this is just something they just do, you know, maybe it's Easter or Christmas. They do this all the time. They know how to reach their town, and they can do that with the people in their local church. It's when you start to get into the bigger cities, no doubt it gets a bit more confusing. So breaking down how to distribute these Gospels of Luke in the big cities, this probably is where you've got some headaches and things like that to resolve.
We've got some good technology we're developing, Neil, around the SA1 map. So the statistical area 1, which will typically have 400 people in it. And in the cities, that'll be a very dense area. It may actually only be one tall building. So people might have an easy job who have that, but in the regions covering 400 people or 100 residences is hard work. But there's in the inner city, we can get a lot more done quickly. But, you know, we're making some guidelines, Neil, those who might say, look, you know, no unaddressed mail. We'll leave those people alone at this point. We want the Gospels to be in letterboxes that want them. And we're also mindful that this is a letterboxing campaign, but what if, Neil, you and your family are out, you're delivering, and you run into a guy who's out the front and he's washing his Hilux. What are you going to do? What's the best approach then?
And you could have one of those Gospels on hand for that connecting moment when you're making a new friend. Hey, let me ask you about training, because some people will say, oh, of course I'd like to be involved in what you're doing. What am I supposed to do? But you've got some training going and partnering with another great organisation called OAC, Open Air Campaigners, Andrew Walkington. What's the plan there? How does he do that training?
Well, Andrew's a great evangelism trainer. He actually teaches evangelism at the Brisbane School of Theology, but he's what you call a walk-up evangelist, working at Queensland Uni here. So Andrew has come in, he's given us some training, initial session, which was excellent. We've recorded that, and we'll have further training as well, because these incidental conversations are important, and there will be people who, in pairs, will say, look, why don't we take the gospel to the front door? And, let's see if they'd like to take this gift from us and perhaps present this as a book of great interest, great influence in the world, and maybe just ask people a question like, have you read this?
You're well prepared, Dan, because, sometimes to say, I'm going to be part of the training, I better set up a diary date and put the time in there and try and be on that Zoom call or whatever it is. But you've already had an initial training, and you had 200 people there, the first Answers Army training night, and that's about to be available on your website so that people can access that wherever they're living.
That's correct. So those who are volunteering will have access to this training. It's very, very important. That was on the 20th of August, and on the 29th of August, Martin Niles will be in to address the training as well. So that's coming up very shortly.
And so many people get enthusiastic because of a Martin Iles appearance. Martin's just got this wonderful magnetic ability to attract people and to be able to articulate a cause. He's right behind this Gospel of Luke distribution, and no doubt there's going to be a lot of initiatives that are going to follow on from there. But come back to this enthusiasm that Martin generates.
Well, Martin's key attribute, I think, is clarity. So Martin can explain why we're doing it, how this is going to impact people, and the importance, the transformative importance of the Word of God. Martin is someone who loves the Word of God. He loves the gospel, and he wants that to be in the hearts and the homes of everyday Australians. And so he has that vision, and he wants us to impart that to those around us.
Now, no doubt individuals could take up the challenge here and they can be a part of this distribution, but I'm sure it's the motive that you would have to want to involve churches. How do churches get involved?
Churches can register. Perhaps the point person from their church will register, but ultimately, if a church says we'll do our area, then the church will order the boxes, the maps, and they'll do it with their own people. And so that can be a congregational effort led by the relevant person in the church. So we hope that happens because, Neil, it'll actually make the project a little cheaper. It's $1.50 a gospel delivered, which is expensive. But if a church takes it on, we can send a lot of gospels there, and that'll actually reduce the overall cost of the project.
And so at Answers in Genesis, you're looking to resource the local church to be able to do an effective outreach in their own community. And so this is one of those things, a real opportunity here.
Absolutely. Like everyone wants to be like the Apostle Paul. Everyone wants to be on a ship, maybe not to get shipwrecked, but to be out there preaching the Word of God in some way, perhaps with a little less persecution, but this is a way where people can say, look, I've read the Acts of the Apostles, it's all very inspiring, I'd like to do something. And so to be out and to be mobile, to be moving, to be distributing the Word of God gives people that outlet. And for churches to lead it, lets them do that with their own flavour, in their own context, because churches know their area, they know their neighbourhood, and they know how to motivate their people. So that would be our dream, Neil, that this would be picked up by churches. What we found in our training last week was there was about probably 120 churches of all flavours represented in that training, and we were delighted to actually read that list into the training, which was really very inspiring, just the breadth of Christians and the sort of churches they go to.
Interesting when you say all flavours represented, and there'll be some who are saying, well, I wonder whether our church has an identifying factor with Answers in Genesis. And of course, coming back to Genesis and the challenge that is before us to be able to connect God with the current issues and challenges that are going on in our society. This is where Genesis is so powerful, and where Answers in Genesis has been so significant in the way that they've been able to connect the reality of what's going on with God as creator and connecting him with Jesus and his lordship and into the current way that we reach out into our communities. You're going to be using the Gospel of Luke. Now, the Gospel of Luke, fabulously easy to read, a fabulously wonderful gospel to be able to connect with people.
You know, Luke did a very thorough, very comprehensive, very detailed gospel. He was that sort of guy. So he wrote Luke, he wrote Acts. He actually wrote most of the New Testament, if you can believe that, Neil. And the reality is that this gospel is so readable for people because it's so well set out. So it's our absolute privilege to be putting the Gospel of Luke on this occasion onto the benchtops of people around Warner and Brendale, all those lovely suburbs around Brisbane and around the country.
So it's all around the country, and you're wanting to connect with people who want to be a part of the Answers Army. And to initially connect, I imagine it's just a matter of going to the website and answersingenesis.com.au. What will people do when they go to the website and they're thinking, how am I going to connect with this Answers Army?
It's simply answersingenesis.org, but it's okay. It'll auto locate to Australia. So just answersingenesis.org. Immediately there, Neil, when you go there on the banner, it'll be volunteer, a big tile, and then they'll go down, they'll be able to put their details in, provide their location, and they'll be then queued up for the training and equipped with the Gospels and the maps. And it'll be a wonderful opportunity. We're really excited about it. We've just signed the order for the printing of our Gospels, and so we're looking forward to their arrival from overseas.
And I imagine that if you've got a relationship with the pastor or priest in your church, that would be something you might check in with them and say, hey, I'm going to be the point person here. Will that work best?
Absolutely. That's the right way to do it, Neil.
So answersingenesis.org. And you'll know that Answers in Genesis is a global organisation. But when you go to answersingenesis.org, that'll take you immediately to the Australian site. You'll be able to find that banner and you'll be able to become a part of the Answers Army. And of course, Dan Flynn, the Executive Director of Answers in Genesis Australia, looking forward to Martin Isles, who's back in Australia at the end of the month. He's going to be part of the training that's coming up on the 29th of August. And so you might want to be a part of an initiative here which wants to put the gospel into every home in Australia. So write down that website address and connect with it where you can, answersingenesis.org. Dan Flynn, thank you so much for updating us today on 2020.
It's a privilege. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.